Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coach's Corner. I got the whole gang here, and today we're going to be talking about Kazuya Mishima. I'm actually very surprised that we haven't even had this episode yet, just being how relevant the character is. But before we get into the episode, if you guys enjoy the podcast and you want to keep supporting us and you want us to keep seeing this podcast thrive and do many things in the future, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to let us know in the comments how you feel about Kazuya Mishima. And yeah, with that, let's get right into it. So I think first what we can do is we can talk about what is frustrating about the character. And this character does frustrate me, but I think this is just a good way to start because we'll also cover what makes the character strong, right? So obviously the number one thing on my list, which I think most people will say the most frustrating thing about Kazuya is electric and just, getting 0 to death and all that jazz. But to me, the most frustrating thing is his weight. His weight is what really tips it over for me in terms of just how overtuned this character feels. And I say overtuned, but I don't even put this character in my top 10 or like might be in my lower part of top 10. But it's just whatever Kazuya is very good at, he's just ridiculously overtuned and then has really bad weaknesses, right? And then some characters can edge guard him and cover for this weakness, and then other characters maybe not as strong and stuff like that. Because even juggling, I don't even think Kazuya can get out of juggle situations or has a decent amount of options to get out of juggle situations compared to the other characters. I think his biggest struggle is offstage. Down air, like having a stall and fall is really good. Up air is a hurt box shift if you get enough distance away. It has a large hitbox.
Down B armor.
Yeah. Armor command
crazy.
grab that has a lot of armor. So let's not even talk about how it's free to juggle Kazuya because it's not.
He sounds tight already.
Yeah. So, but his weight is what really I think tips it over because his weight enables him to have so many chances at the 0 to death. Has so many chances to use the rage drive. Right, like there's a lot of matchups where you can go ahead and get rid of Terry before he even hits go meter. Right. I think for Kazuya, that same thing applies with Rage, but it just depends on the character. But the weight does not help. And also, for how heavy he is, his hurt box, usually characters that are in that super heavy weight class, I think Kazuya is like 5th or 6th heaviest character in the entire game. Look at all the other characters around his weight class. The only other character with a similar hurt box is maybe Incineroar. But other than that, a fairly small, skinny hurt box comparatively to all these other super heavyweight classes. And again, it just feels like Kazuya gets so many chances over and over again because of this weight, and just it kind of enables the rest of his kit, in my opinion. But it stays true to the point where it's like, okay, well, weight just gives you more layers of execution checks, and in tournament, sometimes you will mess up those layers of execution checks, and your layers of execution checks doesn't really change too much on like the Kazuya player looking at the opponent's weight. It doesn't really matter that much. If it's a heavy character, maybe another rep or two of electric, but that's kind of it. And on top of that, Kazuya doesn't have to worry about losing confirms because electric is set knockback. So, I mean, do I think that his weight is the most broken thing about him? Obviously not. Electric is by far the most strongest thing about him. But I think me personally as a player, when I'm playing against Kazuya, the most frustrating thing, the thing that just gets me annoyed or frustrated is the weight, where it's just like, man, I'm hitting this character at like 160, 170, like still not dead, like holy. And then on top of that, Kazuya's moves just hit so hard that this character utilizes rage art and just the base rage mechanic really well. What are your thoughts, Bam, on just what frustrates you about the character or what you think makes the character so strong?
I would say, on a personal level, not much, but that's because I play characters that like body him, right? But like on a general level, obviously this character he's essentially Super Mac. He's literally, yeah, I said Super Mac, but yeah, he's literally little Mac if like in terms of like polarizing as hell, but then he's like the good version, which just makes it like actually something that is very, very just like toxic per se, right? Like no one wants to really deal with it because, yeah, like you said, I do think that like he does have a couple things for dealing with the juggles, but it's still one of his like weaker things. But obviously, like you said, it's very clear that it's off stage presence. So when you have characters that are able to punish him really hard off stage, it's good. I also think people can just get better at playing against like off stage. Period. People are slowly but steadily getting to a point where they have improved their edge guarding game, and I think that helps a ton versus Kazuya because that character is definitely the rinse and repeat, like you said, and if you but if you don't know how to cover those base things, if you're just gonna let him laser off stage for free and stall when you should just be going under and just bodying the shit out of him, then yeah, he's just gonna come back and electric you and then like just blow you up. I think that it's one of those situations where even in a game where you have a lot more characters that have been having a really strong punish game, obviously he's that reigns supreme, and you have like, yes, electric is absolutely insane, and then also you have that coupled with the absolutely insane crouch dash and the presence that it has, right? For a character that shouldn't initially, you don't feel like he should have that mobility, but he does, and he has a mobility where you literally can't hit him, right? And like unless you swing from swing from like his legs essentially, then he just goes around and he's just blowing through everything with a move that is an anti-air and invincible, and like it's just so good against the base game plan when someone is navigating Smash, right? So it's very jarring in tandem with like, dude, there's just so many little things, like even like the fact that he doesn't have like real like hit lag is very annoying as well too. So you just get blown back by things, and it's just like you're just gone. Like there's no stall, there's no moment to be like, oh, did I or whatever. It's like, nope, just gone. Right? Yeah. You just boom, like deleted. Right? And so there's definitely like there's like so many little avenues, and I think it's no coincidence that he plays the way that he does when Bandai Namco was the team doing all the fine tuning. Later on, there's definitely some clear bias, and also just how they wanted to represent the character and make him super faithful. But he's faithful to a point where it's like it's just so jarring, all the things that he can do, and just kind of the nuance and how he just ranks up to other just standard like Smash play, right? But yeah, dude, the character just deletes you and is invincible half the time. So yeah, that's very, very annoying for a lot of people. And to just lose in neutral and know that it's not a soft situation like that you'd get for a lot of other characters. It could just straight up just be, oh, I'm just straight up dead. And something that once someone has down, like once you have the electrics down, like it's like pre-turnkey to be like, oh yeah, well, you're done. I killed you. Oh, I grabbed you here. Oh, and you didn't DI this one like one time. Now it's like, all right, well, you're dead here. So yeah, I mean, character is just very rough for a lot of people because he just goes neutral to death. That's it. There's no middle ground. There's no of all the additional layers that we love in Smash. You just die. So
just a quick note. I don't think there's any bigger power spike for a player in the history of Smash Brothers from a point of which a player does not know how to electric with Kazuya and then learns how to electric with Kazuya. Do you realize the amount of leveling up you just accomplished? Like you went from how, like, in terms of what results you can get, you could be just a Kazuya that doesn't know how to electric, and then you learn how to electric. You just can jump up the ranks, and all of a sudden you have way more threat in a bracket. And you don't even have to do the 0 to death. An electric does 18 damage. You do electric into an aerial, you're doing like 30 to 40, which is most
insane
characters' damage output, and this happens at any percent. So even in a world with Kazuya not killing you, even at lower level play, and this is the crazy thing, Kazuya is very popular in all forms of bracket. This isn't just like, oh yeah, like all you got to worry about is SkyJ with Incineroar, right? Like, I mean, realistically, yada yada yada, right? Like, no, like there's a bunch of different Kazuyas in a lot of different regions. He's very popular. But yeah, I just wanted to really, that's how broken that move is, to the point where it's like, I don't know any other where it's like in the history of Smash where it's like, oh, once you like learn this technique, your power level just spikes up so hard. Nothing is comparable to electric, in my opinion, in the history of Smash Bros.
There's an infinite dimensional cape, but we banned that one.
Yeah. Win neutral once with Meta Knight.
The best, literally the best move in Smash history. Anyway,
that's a fair point. Yeah, you win neutral
100% is
with 100%. The best.
Whenever people,
the best neutral character in the game, and then you win.
Side note.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say side note too. I always used to hate because like you could and this kind of goes into the whole thing with the Steve. I know we're not talking about him, but I used to hate in friggin' Brawl that people would be like, "Oh yeah, this is banned," and they'd be like, "Okay," and then you'd see people and like they'd hold it just a little bit,
Extended.
Just one or two C sticks. Yeah,
you know, because who knows, right? Oh, you want to watch the replay? Oh, nah, well, 3 minutes, so see you.
No, I get you.
Oh, that's right. You couldn't save replays fast.
Yeah, people used to rob people. I used
Even
to watch
if you
it.
mod it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so unnoticeable, like 1 or 2 taps. Anyway, that's why Meta Knight is better than Fox or Bayo or any of the characters. He's easily the best character Smash has ever seen. Talking about Kazuya though, definitely not easily the best character Smash has ever seen. The thing that I find frustrating about Kazuya, I think it's a fun way to phrase what is good about Kazuya. So to me personally, the most frustrating thing about him is that it feels like Kazuya was designed to not have any nuance. And like he does, because he has like these invincibility timers that are like it's like on side B he's invincible from frame 7 to 9, which is like the most useless, impractical invincibility ever. And so like it's very nuanced, but it's like 0% applicability, right? Like you will never intentionally try to invincibility through something with like a window that is that unpractical. That's what it comes down to. And so oftentimes all of these things that they gave him, like the temporary invincibility or just like the way electric works in general, it feels like it was designed so that he doesn't need any nuance. Because in general, Kazuya does one thing, right? Like in neutral, he wants to create a scramble and then electric you. And then he combos you. And that's it. Like he cannot win neutral by playing long range. He cannot win neutral by poking you at the mid range. He cannot really win neutral by pressuring you up close. He just wants to make a scramble and press electric. That's all he does. And like all of the nuance that you have to understand to counter that, that only exists because of like basically the way his moves work, where there are like random periods of invincibility, etc., etc. So that's like very frustrating, because I think a character that has a win condition of scrambling, per definition, is kind of like poorly designed, because scrambles are kind of like inherently high variance, right? Like you don't know the exact outcome. A scramble, by the way, for those who don't know, it's like a situation in which you're not quite sure who has the upper hand, right? So there's no like super clear dynamic. Like a cloud jumping in and back air, that's like a very clear like pressure situation, or like mid range with punishing, right? Like very clear like bait and punish, overshoot, undershoot situation. A scramble, it's like you're not quite sure, like are you a little bit stronger, or are they a little bit stronger? So Kazuya, like because he doesn't really have anything other than electric, because his power budget is so focused on that singular move, his entire game plan revolves around hitting it, and the only way you really hit is in a scramble. So let's say someone, like they try to like neutral air forward air you, and they miss the forward air, and then you neutral air with Kazuya, and then you buffer an electric out of your landing lag, and then because they barely dropped their combo, now you're gonna 0-def them. That's kind of like the hits that you see from Kazuya. Or you were keeping him out all the time, and you were avoiding scrambles neatly, and after avoiding scrambles 3 times in a row, now he calls out your roll with an electric and you die. So what you find is that like a lot of the counterplay is like it becomes pretty linear, because the only way to avoid fighting him without risk of dying is to jump. And so that's where you get into like the second part that can be frustrating about Kazuya, and that's that he has like really good aerials. Like he has one of the best uppers in the game. I don't know why they made it that like fast and disjointed, and the hitbox is crazy.
The hurtbox shift.
The hurtbox shift, yeah. And then like of course, like his forward air pushes you into like a horizontal situation. It's still like, don't get me wrong, like if you want to avoid fighting Kazuya, you're probably jumping, right? Like you're probably jumping. But like I said, it is just like that. It can be that linear. And we can talk about counterplay later, of course. But those are the things that I find like frustrating, not just about like playing against him, but also like spectating him. I'm like, I just wish there was more to this character, because he has so many moves. But like, I think he has the most like moves out of any character in Smash, right? Like more than Ken, who I think was the number 1 previously. And like, you just don't see most of them.
You don't see like
you see. Yeah, you see there's electric, crouch jab, the up tilt that leads into electric, and then like the crouching, the invincible move that anti-airs and that can kill. That's like just about it in terms of like his ground normals, and that's I just find that like that's a shame, honestly, because the character could be so cool with so many options and so many variations. But at the end of the day,
because of his power budget. Yeah, exactly. Oh, and there's one final thing that's frustrating about Kazuya. So this is like a little bit of a technical thing, but in this game, basically there's about a 13% chance that your input is a frame early, talking about GameCube controller, and about 13% chance that your input is a frame late. And so since electric is a 2-frame window, there's no way to consistently hit electric. Like there will always be a moment where your input can be so if you go for the first frame of the electric timing and your input is early, then you're fucked. And if you go for the second frame, then your input could be late and you're fucked. So that's the stupidest thing is sometimes you'll see Riddles or T who have grinded the electric out infinitely, and then in tournament they'll drop that one critical electric, and it's just lame because anything that's a 2-frame window, you cannot consistently get that with the current input paradigm just because of again, variation variance. So that's also super lame and frustrating because yeah, as stupid as zero to deaths are, I also feel playing a character that kind of lives with the reality that you just you could just drop your most important combo by random chance. I think that's just lame, dude. No need to make it that way.
So one of the interesting things that creates is a player dynamic too, is that whenever you play Kazuya, it doesn't matter whether or not you know the electrics, your opponent's going to, if they know that they don't want to interact with you because it's going to be favorable for you, then everybody tries to avoid interacting with you. And so usually the people who play Kazuya specifically want to interact with the opponent. And so they're almost guaranteed to have a bad time the higher up they go and play, because the better they get at the game, the more people are going to avoid playing with them, even when they're in game. So it's just not fun for anybody on that end. In general, I think that Kazuya is good at mid-level, because what's best at mid-level is usually being able to proactively interact with your opponent and do your thing before they can do theirs. So it's a lot of the time at mid-level, you're just going to have 2 players naring at each other, for example. And Kazuya is generally going to win that war against every single character in the game. So there's exceptions but usually those exceptions are niche or characters that aren't comboed like others. And so the Kazuya player is less likely to be able to execute Kazuya's proactive game plan as per usual, which is doing the electric combos. So things like Shulk Arts, Ice Climbers, etc., etc. So
Greninja.
Yeah. So, and on that note, I've actually seen, including top level Kazuyas, where I'm pretty sure they dropped the electric and the opponent perfectly timed the counterplay to the electric, and then what instead was the dragon punch that comes out super slow and kills it mid percent, and so you'll have the opponent just run into this accidental smash attack. Yeah, and nobody's happy with it. You'll see the Kazuya player just shaking their head when they're getting up. You'll see the player who got hit by it shaking their head while they're getting up. Man. Nobody's happy. So at top level, I would say that play is usually less about interactions and more of playing around your opponent, trying to force their interactions on you while giving them the chance to lose to your own interactions. So basically trying to offer one-sided situations to your opponent. And the problem with that for Kazuya is that when you are playing for position, Kazuya cares a lot less about where you're positioned on stage and more of just a matter of where his combo routes are going to go. So it's not a matter of, oh, well, if I take this, then the follow-up position is going to put me here, and then I'm going to go there, and then my risk reward is worse. It's just a matter of, well, my electrics onto platforms, I'm not sure if I have my platform conversions on key. And that's basically how that works. So it's a completely different stage dynamic in terms of what stage control means. And so you're usually better off if you recognize what the Kazuya opponent's ability to combo is, and then position yourself so that you're just positioned relative so that they're less likely to finish their electric combos, rather than actually focusing on what's usually good stage control. So I think that's the other reason that he's very frustrating as you go up higher. Another thing is that one of the better things you can do at high level play is to put out things like pokes and safe pokes, like a sword character down tilts and whatnot. And it just so happens that it's fairly arbitrary which characters are going to be able to crouch under electric, which characters can down tilt under electric. And so you'll even have characters like King DDD, where he can reverse crouch, but then characters like Roy just can't crouch under it either way. So like he can't down tilt, but DDD can. Like it's just very arbitrary, like I said. So the idea is that it doesn't feel deliberate. As Ramses mentioned, it just feels very arbitrary, very lack of nuance. Now, with that said, what we'll see from higher level Kazuya is I would argue that, for example, Riddles and T approach Kazuya as a character in terms of how they perform with the character, targeting very different weaknesses. So Riddles is focused on finding his interaction points, whereas T is focused on exploiting the holes in the opponent's interaction points. And so I would say T thrives more off of opponent's weakness, whereas Riddles projects his own strength. And so I think that's part of the reason why Riddles is so consistent. Not that T isn't, because these are both two of the most consistent players on the planet. But I think in T's case, it's more of consistency through his tech, whereas Riddles, while he is also consistent in tech, I would say his greatest consistency is his ability to maneuver and to find his positions, find his timings, and to find his jump-ins. As Ramses mentioned, to find those scramble situations and force them onto the opponent from his own end. And that's also something that most players, again, as you go up higher in level, players try to avoid forcing scramble situations because they're inconsistent. And as you go up in play level, as a rule of thumb, not across the board, obviously, but most top level players learn to abhor inconsistency, to abhor high stakes gambles, and to focus on interactions that give them more consistency. Even if they're not as rewarding, they don't want to gamble, because that's not how you get to top level. You don't get to top level by rolling dice and hoping you come out with sixes. You get there by just going for sevens. You go for like a 6 and a 1, 3 and a 4. You don't go for 6-6 for a 12. Like that's the odds of that happening are low, and that's not how you get there. That's how the difference between those two dynamics is whether or not someone's consistently in the top 8 versus someone who makes a top 8 and usually is in the top 16. Is whether or not they're rolling for the 12s or the 7s. So because of that nuance, Kazuya inherently favors rolling for 12s because of the character being as inconsistent and thriving in inconsistent situations. And it just makes it that much more impressive that players like Riddles manage to find that consistency within an inherently inconsistent character, because he not only is astute at playing those proactive positions, but he's also, when there is an inconsistency that arrives from the character, from the stage, whatever, he's there to pick it up and then turn it into a different kind of advantage. And then Riddles, as a player, is still capable of taking advantage of that as well, as is Tia, of course. So I think that that's one of the key things that leads into counterplay also, to go ahead and flow into that, is how well players are able to play around the scramble forces, how well they're able to essentially refuse to interact with Kazuya while still making profit, and then whether they are able to maneuver any drops or inconsistent situations that Kazuya doesn't want into their favor, or when Kazuya tries to overextend to follow up on a drop. So things like that. And that's where Riddles really excels. And the difference between, say, I think the peak interaction that is the difference between Riddles and T is that Riddles is going to electric, and then he's going to dash grab you, whereas T is going to electric, and then he's going to electric 2 more times because he's betting that you're gonna think too much into it, and he's just going to play the risk reward and bet you that you can't whiff punish the electric on reaction. And some people straight up can't, even though it's a super laggy move, just because they haven't practiced with punishing it. They haven't practiced responding to the tells that Kazuya players usually have. And then on top of that, I would say Riddles and T, less than most Kazuya players, also don't have to buffer their electric. So most Kazuya players require an action, and then they'll buffer the electric inputs to make it more consistent by doing that. So usually what you'll see is they'll intentionally like whiff an aerial that can't possibly hit, but usually is going to let them just essentially jump forward with the electric after. Or maybe they'll even put in a crouch dash so that they have 2 actions buffered out for it. But the idea is they try to compensate for the inconsistency of the actual electric input by putting out buffers. And so I would say that most high-level Kazuyas versus like the big 2 is that the big 2 can actually raw electric consistently while also having these other strong points.
Yeah, I think that was going to be the first thing I wanted to mention when it comes to counterplay, especially on the lower levels. Like Tony pointed out earlier, T and Riddles, they have way more depth on how they electric. When you're especially at low and mid level, Kazuyas will you got to kind of figure out, all right, so this person, if it's lower or mid level, right? You're like first couple rounds of the tournament, you're fighting Kazuya. You're not fighting T or Riddles. Maybe when they hit the electric, they'll turn into T or Riddles and just 0 to death you. That's a huge possibility. But to do that first electric, they're probably setting up buffer windows, right? A spot dodge into electric. Do they like to nair into electric? Aerials into electric? Do they... What type of things are they doing to set up into electric? And I think the main win condition against Kazuya is whiff punishing electric. I think that's got to be number 1, or it's really high up there if it's not number 1, because if you cannot whiff punish electric, oh boy, you're in for a ride, because they are going to spam it. Because after the first electric, guess what they can do if they see that you're clearly not going to get hit by it? To cover that first electric up, they'll go into another electric. So at that point, they already have the buffer window, so they can spam electric. And if a Kazuya can spam electric versus you in neutral, and I know there are some characters that are not like very fast, quick, and nimble, and as good as whiff punishing, but most characters should be able to at least like position in some way, shape, or form, because Kazuya is so slow to whiff punish electric. Does that take a little bit more? Does that take better positioning if your character's slower? Yes. I mean, that's just generally how it goes. You're gonna have to work a little harder on your positioning, right? But especially if you play a character that can whiff punish, that's really quick, that's going to be your main win condition. And then, the other basic things are like edge guarding and stuff like that. But one thing that I highly recommend anyone that wants to, like, one of the players that really stand out to me that does really well versus Kazuya is Chase. I think Chase plays the matchup really well. I think Palu is a great character versus Kazuya overall, because what are the check marks, right? I want to whiff punish electric. I want to edge guard the character. I want to have safe shield pressure, right? So when you're able to weave in and hit Kazuya and like force him to shield and then get out, that's such a good thing. And most characters can actually do this. You have to have a bit of mobility to initiate like the dash away, because you still don't want to be next to him, right? So if you can like hit shield dash away and Kazuya can't really do anything about that, then you're safe to go, or you're good to go. And I think Uppy is like frame 12 or 13. It's
10.
10?
I think it's 10.
No way. That was not frame 10.
Not?
It's not 10. It's not 10.
I would.
Oh, it's 12.
be
It's 12.
raging.
All right.
Oh yeah. I'm
got
like,
it.
it's definitely not 10.
Dude, that's only 2. That's 2 difference. The difference.
I
not
know,
that
but
bad.
still, though, bro. Like, imagine if
It's
it's
12.
10. Nigga, 10.
That's
Oh
crazy.
my gosh.
It's fast enough to be commitment. Let's put it that way.
Right. If you like dash attack in the Kazuya shield or something, like, you're probably gonna get hit. But by overall standards, that is a very slow out of shield when we're looking at the top tier characters of the game, one of them being plus on shield with up tilt with certain tools, being Steve. But yeah, so with that being said, being able to shield pressure Kazuya, the scary thing though is, do they have enough time to electric, right? Are they already moving towards you? Are you running off a platform and they're underneath you and like you can run off back air, but they just got there and they're not even in like shield drop lag or nothing like that. So they could go into electric, right? And anti-air you. So that's the more gamble part. That's why I think you have to play neutral so well. And a big thing about Kazuya, in my opinion, characters like any heavy character, any super heavy character, to me, when I viewed the character, like, oh yeah, you can take the gamble, get a really huge upset, or you know what I mean? But generally these big, heavy, slower characters, they tend to be not as consistent because they don't have like the frame data and stuff to back it up, and they usually have to gamble, but they have weight. So what weight does is it puts kind of like a stamina bar. To me, super heavies are a big skill check, right? Whereas like when you watch Leo or Tweak fight a Bowser player, what's going to happen? They are going to win neutral. They're going to ledge trap. They're going to juggle. They're going to punish the disadvantage. They're going to execute extremely well because they are some of the best players in the world. Now, when we creep down into mid and lower level, the neutral
You got her.
clean, the ledge trapping's not as clean, right? And that's when these kind of characters can thrive. And Kazuya is the most extreme variant of that because, again, yeah, with the weight, Kazuya gets so many chances, right? So even when you lock into a set and you like say you have to play a best of 5 with a Kazuya player, no matter what, that is just that it's gonna take a while, right? Especially if your character doesn't edgeguard Kazuya sub 100 and stuff like that. Like you're gonna have to play a very clean game, and you aren't gonna have much room for error. So the way I look at it, it's just it's also a stamina check too, right? Because not only are you gonna have to go through these execution checks of ledge trapping Kazuya, safe shield pressure, whiff punishing electric, and you're on edge the entire time because you mess up one of these and everything can go to shit, right? So it's like playing in these high tense situations where the risk reward is still on your side, but it's like what their reward is, it's so overwhelming that's where I think the fear factor comes into play in tournament against Kazuya. So you just got to make sure to keep that in check. And you're just going to have to go on this uphill battle. It's going to take a lot of stamina, and you just have to have faith in your fundamentals because where the character lacks is the mobility, right? The mobility and neutral is where the character lacks, unless they get up close, right? So even when you're thinking about, okay, I got electric here tonight. What was the scenario that created, if it was a scramble situation that Kazuya got the electric from, which is most of the case, right? As Ramses mentioned, how did you let yourself get into that scramble situation with Kazuya when he's so slow, right? And this is where I have to give a lot of props to Riddles and T, because when they're playing Kazuya, they're playing against some really ridiculous characters in neutral, and they're able to set up these scenarios and then get the electric. And that is, again, very hard to do.
That's crazy.
Like Diddy Kong and stuff like that. Like Riddles having sets on tweak is insane. And like Diddy is a very quick, nimble character that can use monkey flip as a horizontal burst to disengage in a lot of corner scenarios and go up and over. Kazuya, it's pretty hard for Kazuya to chase that kind of stuff. And also having the banana too. So, you also have to realize, like, yes, Kazuya is bullshit, but you also have to realize, like, why is the bullshit connecting? Why are you in the scenario where the bullshit can kill you in one hit, right? And it can get very frustrating, yes. But at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, your character's neutral is probably better than Kazuya's and your character's mobility. Now, in the future 5 years or 2 years or 3 years from now, where Kazuya's get super fucking crazy big brain and they can invincible dash and time it exactly to your hitbox and then like go into an electric which covers multiple options and kind of use the mobility that Kazuya has and maximizes it with like hitbox or just, superb control and consistency. Maybe we can see that change, but as of right now, we are not in that world, right? So your character has better neutral and better mobility. Most likely, most characters do. And I mean, if you're not, you're probably like a lower mid tier. And you have to abuse that versus Kazuya. You just have to make sure you don't let Kazuya into these scenarios. And again, if you can't, I think step 1 is whiff punish electric. If you have no idea what to do against Kazuya, learn how to whiff punish electric. Because if you can't learn how to whiff punish electric, Kazuya, they don't even have to play neutral anymore versus you. They don't have to care. They don't have to give a flying fuck about what they do in neutral because it's like, oh, once you show the Kazuya player that you cannot whiff punish electric or your whiff punishes on electric, like, aren't that hard hitting, you get the whiff punish on electric and you can't push the advantage state as well, then they don't have to give a fuck. They don't have to care. And then they're just going to keep like, okay, I'm going to just throw out this crazy risk reward electric and they don't hit me hard enough and I kill them. Cool. Right. So you have to get that. And then the next step after that is once you whiff punish electric, now you have threat in neutral. Now you have to work on your advantage state, right? Or the next step to work on in neutral is like safe pressure, not letting the scrambles get enabled. And the next step is after that, I would say step 3 is to, work on that advantage state, work on the juggles, work on working around like some of the unique things he has in juggle situations, like the stall and fall, like the armor grab. And then you have to shit on him off stage. And this is where like there becomes nuance because not every character can edge guard Kazuya, right? Like For example, I play Fox. So one of the things that I always have to deal with in that matchup, and which is really frustrating, is since I can't edgeguard Kazuya sub 100, the only time I can kill him is if the stage is like not a high ceiling, I laser him to 99, and I have a bit of rage, which is hard to do, and I hit a sour nair into up smash at the sweet spot window where I have like maybe 60 or 80% rage, and he barely dies off the top. If it's not like Town and City or some other place with a high ceiling. But you see how precise that is, that I have to think like that deep about it because of how Rage Drive is. And Fox being a light character, I also have to think, if I fight Rage Drive, I die at 40 or 50. Now I can't get this rage, right, to finish off the kill and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of stuff past those 3 initial points that get way more character specific and stuff like that. But essentially, if you can edge guard the character, get really good at it, because the more you edge guard Kazuya, the less you have to deal with Rage Drive and like max rage Kazuya and yada yada, right? And I think that's where the character's at its strongest, because you can't even ledge trap the character the same when he has Rage Drive, because he has a frame, he has a get up super option, essentially. He has a frame 1 intangible option. So your meaty aerials, like Fox spamming Nair at the edge, he can react to that during the normal get and be like, oh, you're mashing here? Take 40 or 50 or die, right? Like, so.
There's still 1 frame of vulnerability, but it's less consistent.
Oh, is there 1 frame? I thought it was just straight frame 1.
Normal get up has, so normal get up itself has 1 frame of vulnerability. So you can punish it in normal. But it's still 34. Like if you're spamming there, you're still like, you're still in an inconsistent situation. Something that I think is interesting to talk about, because I think it applies to a lot of different matchups, is linearity. So a big mistake that people make versus Kazuya that I think is very easy to fix is that because Kazuya looks like such a linear character, they approach the matchup linearly themselves. And so, as Tony mentioned before, there are a lot of ways that Kazuya players can kind of like insert themselves to mess with your linearity in a way that enables their linearity, so to say. So, for example, T mostly messing with your game plan, and Brittle's mostly enforcing his own options on you. So some things that you'll see from Kazuya players a lot is that they will mix between like Charles said, whiffing an electric and then throwing out another electric. But then if you are ready for the second electric, you're probably looking for some sort of animation. And as soon as you see an animation, you're going to confirm and throw out your dash attack. So what Kazuya players will do is they'll electric, spot dodge, and then electric. And because that timing is just a little bit different, you get caught by the second electric, right? Something else that you see is that a Kazuya player will dash shield, and then you'll set up your safe pressure, and then he will just drop his shield immediately and electric your quote unquote safe pressure because it is invincible. And now your Shroud Becker is going to get invincibility through, then he gets a full combo. So what you find is that a lot of the time, it's not really the linearity does limit him, but more than anything, it gives you a focus. And so, in other words, if you want to beat Kazuya for being a linear character, it's not about abusing the linearity. It's about figuring out how the opponent has adjusted their play to not be linear. And so this is something that you find very often, is that if there is a weakness for a character, you don't abuse the weakness. You look for how the opponent avoids the weakness. So for example, Greninja players have really bad shield because, bad out of shield, blah, blah. So a lot of Greninja players will use full hops and rolls to never have to shield. So if you want to abuse the bad shield of Greninja, you should be calling out the full hops and rolls, right? Same thing for Fox, right? Fox doesn't have amazing grab reward. So how do a lot of Foxes beat shield? Well, for example, they will, empty land or they will down air. And now these things, they're not bad, but they're not as good as doing a nair, right? So oftentimes weaknesses lead to patterns, and these patterns are what you should be abusing. So the same goes for Kazuya. When you see, okay, well, he's linear. Okay, so what is he doing to not be linear? Is he mixing in these spot dodges? Is he feinting with shield? Is he using his other tools to mix you up that are lower reward? Those things will really, really go a long, long way in beating a character like Kazuya. And the same goes for a lot of Steve players. If you look at a lot of the modern Steve players, people will be like, oh, all he does is up tilt and minecart. Yeah, all he does is up tilt and minecart, but they have figured out small nuances to make up tilt and minecart more than just up tilt and minecart. And the same goes for Kazuya. It's not just electric. There's a lot of different contexts and nuances to when the electric comes out. And now this is not a character design thing, more of a fundamental game thing, right? So you can apply this way of thinking to a lot of different characters and in my experience, see better results pretty quickly. So really recommend thinking about, like, if you struggle with a local Kazuya, think about, like, what were you intending that was incorrect? And then ask yourself, is your opponent was specifically trying to get you to go for that intention and then kind of like counter it. So, right. So for example, like electric, he intentionally like spot dodges because he knows you're intending to whiff punish. And then you can from there try to adjust your intentions to more accurately counter what your opponent is trying to do. That's it. That's the monologue.
So we're just getting towards the tail end of the episode real quick. So we're going to go over just 2 more topics around the horn real quick. Your guys' opinion on the ban on Kazuya, which I, for one, think is really, really funny and ridiculous. And just overall, what you think Kazuya's strength is in the current meta. You guys can give like a top whatever, or you can just fairly say like obviously he's very relevant. But in my opinion, Kazuya is just a very overtuned fighting game character. We've played against this since Smash 4. It's the same shit, guys. Fucking run away from this motherfucker, right? Like, you just run away from him and you do safe shit for your 20-30 minute set, and it really fucking sucks, but the risk reward's too high. So you got to run away, and you have to just like pick your scenarios and pick your scrambles very carefully. And I mean, it's the same shit as all the other fighting game characters. Don't be next to them, right? Because they do more than you. Or when you do get next to them, you have to play very well around whatever they're currently doing, right? So I don't think that character even should be discussed for banning. I just think it's hilarious. The only character that could maybe be banned is like Steve, but I don't even think that anymore, because the only reason why I would want a Steve ban in the first place is just for a patch. Not even just because like the character deserves to be banned. It's more so just like maybe we would have got a patch out of it, but I think that opportunity is far gone.
That's the only good reason.
That is
honestly.
in my opinion,
the 100%.
So
100%.
Yeah. And then in terms of character strength, it's so hard for me to put Kazuya anywhere on the tier list just because it's like, fuck, this character kills you in one hit, right? Like, this is getting toxic in terms of ranking it. But I still have faith in top players' ability to execute neutral and advantage state. And I think we're getting to the point where people are getting better and better at it. And so for that reason, I think Kazuya highest to me would maybe be top 10. And that's like me being optimistic about the character. I think realistically, he's more like 10 to 15-ish. And I have to put him in the 10 to 15-ish, even though I don't think his neutral deserves it. But it's more so just he can hit you one time. He's a great tournament character in that sense. He can instill the fear. And yeah, that's where I currently think he's at. And I think he can get higher. Like, I think the ceiling is not reached yet for the character, because obviously crouch dashing, like maybe crazy insane crouch dashing with hitboxes and yada yada. So the character does have a future for being able to climb up, in my opinion. But currently I think he's like 10, 15. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, like the character that was strong. I think was one of the few characters that kind of actually can be a pocket in this current meta, because his punish game is so insane. Same like you talk about, stay away from this character. I mean, this character is just gonna blow you up, and understand that when you're approaching this character, the standard like if you are able to get this character in shield, like you want to practice your setups and like kind of pressure that you can have, because there's unique shield pressure that this character can't deal with. That on average may be like you think that this would have such a big gap, but he really can't do anything. He can't do electric here, and so you have the safe pressure opportunity. So if you have him and you can get him in the shield, especially with a lot of characters in this game that have disjoints, you could be in a good position, right? So understand those timings. Understand the nuance of the lull, like use down tilt on crouch dash, like certain situations. It actually is very good, but know the spacing for it. But obviously understand that it's with context. It's not, hey, let me go ahead and just keep down tilting here. He can never get me. And then you just get blown up for it and say it doesn't work anymore, right? It definitely has its spades. And then please edge guard the crap out of this character. Kazuya Mishima should not return to this stage, man. Once you see that character, like literally his stocks plummet, dude. Literally just body that character off stage the best possible way. But yeah, going into what you're talking about in terms of this character actually being a warrant for a ban, I think that doesn't make any sense at all. I think that there's still ways that even though the character can still grow, like we were talking about, I also think there's ways people can just get better at this matchup. And right now, a lot of people aren't good at even the basic of like, okay, how do I deal with someone going from electric to electric? Because if you're not going to do that, like we've talked about throughout the course of this podcast, you're going to get clapped. They're just going to keep doing that to you, and you're just going to lose, right? Same thing if like, dude, if like it's like a Game & Watch standing there just doing down smash all day. Like if you don't know what you're doing, then I'm just going to keep spamming this thing because like you're a clown for that. Like understand that move is insane, but once you learn to kind of navigate around that, and get your guaranteed combos. As always, when you know this character is bad off stage, newsflash, you should probably tailor your combo game to get the character off stage. All right, don't be sitting there doing your like, oh yeah, I did this good damage. Maybe I can compete. No, you're not competing with Kazuya. He's gonna hit you and you're gonna die. Punish for punish is like he's insane, right? So, again, make sure that you're getting this character off stage. Once you get this character off stage, understand the nuances of it. It's not that hard. He has a very few things. He has a couple stalls. He has a side B, and he has his laser, and then he has his up B, right? And it's like once you really understand how to navigate those things and understand the lag, especially on the laser, because gosh, I can't stand seeing offstage laser from Kazuya, and they just do it every time, and everyone's in shields, like like he's gonna rob them or something. Yeah, it's crazy, man. That's really that. That's that 1% privilege right there, man. Freaking Kazuya. But I think that people really need to understand those things and see the character for what it is. Like it is almost like a modern ice climber. Like this is this one thing he wants. It's really good. It's disgusting. Deal with it. Understand it and deal with it. Don't stop trying to play the same game with a character who's not playing the same game as you. That's it.
You know what we did to Ice Climbers in Brawl? We platform camped the shit out of them, and we ran for time. And that's
we did
back in my day.
Yeah, that's my opinion on Kazuya. I think current meta, he's probably like Charles said, top 10, top 15. I think if people learn a counterplay, he should be like top of high tier, bottom of top tier ish. And then like if we get to like the box Kazuya, he could be the best in the game. Like honestly, depending on. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like depending on how close we get to that, like if someone gets to the point where he can just like react to someone's jump with like an invincible crouch dash and like everything becomes crazy. Maybe. I don't see it happening. So like that is my opinion on how strong he is. As for the ban, my personal ban philosophy, I'm like an old school ban philosophy guy, right? Like I read the Serlin article. To me, banning should only be done if something is over centralizing. So think about something like Meta Knight in Brawl or Bayo Cloud in Smash 4 double.
Yeah. Or Cloud in doubles.
Cloud in Smash 4 doubles. So I don't think he's centralizing at all. I think like there was an argument that he isn't fun to play against. But as we have seen with the Steve bans, it doesn't really it's not like it's gonna pull extra people in. Like nothing's gonna happen. So I don't really see it, and I think like it's a slippery slope anyway. So ban is silly. We can all agree to that, except for Tony, who I heard is very pro ban. I see that wink. No, yeah, I think the character is frustrating mostly because he puts the focus of the game so much on punish game, which is unheard of outside of Smash 4 Bayo, ironically. But once you understand the character well, you can counterplay him. And again, like the biggest thing, and we talked about it with Incineroar as well, right? Like if you have to give something like a 7 out of 10 respect, and it's like very rewarding, and you're in tournament, you're going to give it like a little bit more respect, and that makes the move like a lot better. That is Kazuya in a nutshell. So the more familiar you get with Kazuya, the more accurately you can respect the character, and the less powerful he gets. Because at the end of the day, like the character wins through you giving him more room, more respect than he has to, because you're not sure that you can like play nuanced enough to play like quote unquote correctly. Because that is the thing. If you perfectly respect Kazuya and your estimation was a little bit off, then he kills you, right? So you're always gonna pressure him a little or respect him a little bit more. But I feel like at the moment, especially, like people just don't understand when to respect him, how to respect him. the nuances, the positioning, the reaction, the mental stack, etc., etc. So like once there's more development there, I feel like the character is gonna decrease in strength enough to not be the menace he is right now.
Regarding the ban, I'm just going to echo the points that I said when we discussed banning Steve, and that I don't think on power level he's bannable, but I also don't think that you have to have a reason to ban something, whether it's a character other than we don't like it. And then if the tournament goers don't want to go to the tournament because he's banned, don't go, and let the TOs know that's not why you're not going. If you want a character or stage banned, then don't go, and let them know. Hey, if you get rid of this, I'll go to your event. And that's how things decide. It's a matter of what the community wants to do. It doesn't have to be a fully rational reason other than I don't like it. I like the game more this way, so I go to the tournaments that have this way. It's a game. We're there to show up, have fun, and do the things that we think are appropriate for the game, to test the skills that we want to test. And even if it's scrubby, if that's how you want to run it, then run it that way. Do what makes you happy. Do what makes your tournament goers happy. And that's ultimately what matters. Now, again, like going to Surlinism, no, I don't think Kazuya qualifies under Surlinist beliefs that the character needs to be over-centralized or obviously overpowered or whatnot. Although I will say, I do believe that some players who have not experienced as broad of a range of powerful characters in Smash believe that Kazuya does qualify. I think that we are all biased because we have tasted the strongest varieties of these, but that doesn't necessarily mean that just because he's a lot milder in flavor doesn't mean that he doesn't reach that point. So he doesn't reach it for me, but I can see why he would for others. I think that when players are first approaching Kazuya, like Charles said, the weight is a big difference maker for players, especially at lower levels of play, because he gets more opportunities to play his game and gets punished, or rather has to be punished more times. That's more times you have to practically whiff punish the electric without making a mistake consecutively, usually. And so I think that the first thing you want to do when you're learning the matchup is actually finish your food when you hit Kazuya for doing something foolish or misevaluating the risk reward. If you're not finishing your food and you're letting his weight come into play because you're not edge guarding him, because you're not reaction parrying the offstage laser and then running off, and then of course Kazuya has the mix up. If he thinks you're going to parry the laser, he just doesn't shoot it and just drifts back the ledge, in which case you can just call that out. So it's a 50-50 on which one you're going for. But if you learn how to edge guard Kazuya and you can just hit these very reasonable reaction checks, like this is, I think it's like frame 27 laser or something like that, very reasonable to parry that window. And so you want to be able to finish the food and essentially 0 to death Kazuya. And if you can't, then the matchup's going to get drastically more difficult. The more times you have to win neutral, it's that many more times difficult to win the matchup. And then likewise, the more Kazuya gets his combos, that many more times is going to be how much easier it is for Kazuya to win. And so if Kazuya is not finishing his combos, the difference between 2-touching and 1-touching someone is literally being twice as good. And the difference between 2-touching and 3-touching someone is like 150% as good. So keep in mind, every single iteration of your combo ceiling that you get, how consistent you are as a Kazuya player, is going to drastically improve your results. And for more mid-level players, I think, again, like Charles said, you need to be able to just run away, be able to avoid it, and just refuse to interact unless you specifically have your terms or you see he's done something like totally reactable that you are ready for. Like if he goes for a forward smash, or if he messes up his electric and goes for the super laggy version, go for that, punish that on reaction. Just go ahead and run away from him the whole game. And there is nuance to that because Kazuya can then, instead of trying to electric, he just walks you into the corner while you run away, lets you run yourself into a disadvantage so that you don't have as many places to escape, and then try and read you once your options are simplified. And so there is nuance to it. And then likewise, once he gets you there, that's usually where reading the player comes into effect. And there's a lot more nuance to the game at that point. And that's something we actually need to see people playing first, because that level of the game usually doesn't even come up in the first place, because everything just stops because people get stuck on the electric part of the gameplay loop and just give up there. So all in all, I think Kazuya is one of, if not the best characters in pools. And I think that once you make it out of pools, he drops off very hard, because at that point, that's when players stop trying to force interactions as often to give you free electric openings. And he gets a lot harder. And that's where you just get the Riddles T dynamic, where it's just going to be those two, and no other Kazuya is going to make it to top 8. So at that point, I think that's where Kazuya falls off pretty hard. I do agree that he can improve significantly, like in terms of TAS level play. He scales up very well and very efficiently, but he's also a character, again, this is the difference between 2 touching someone and 1 touching someone. The difference between that last percent, between being 99% consistent and 100%, which is not possible, is that's 200% performance on that last 1% of a skill improvement on technical consistency. So you need to understand that how consistent he is always going to be limited by the Kazuya players. And so I don't know what the character is going to look like, because I don't know how consistent the player base is going to get with it. Same thing when we were discussing Steve. Steve is always going to be better than his player base, and he's always going to be limited by his player base just because of it might not be humanly possible to execute the character to their full potential. So I will say that even with that withstanding, I tend to be biased toward characters that can simplify punish game, and I tend to shy away from characters like Aegis, where it's death by 1,000 cuts, or 10 cuts as it were. I like to have simple, these are your 5 rock, paper, scissors interactions for the game. If you play well, it's just going to be these 3. And I think that that's a better way to play the game. I think that's a lot more stamina efficient for especially top level tournament play. And that the more you can simplify the game, the more your opponent is capable of overthinking it and misplaying the situations. And so that's where I'm at on the whole situation.
Nice. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Coach's Corner. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And in the comments, let us know what you think about Mr. Kazuya Mishiba. But until next time, class dismissed.